Good afternoon, everyone. Good to have everyone on board for this presentation on equips. This is our chance. We do this about once a month where we have a focus on what we've been building. Our engineering team has done an excellent job over the last several weeks and months building things that we've released. And so the focus of this webinar is to tell you how to get even more out of equips. And it's really geared toward those who are already using equips. And so I know a number of you that are signed up for this webinar are in that category. Some of you may not be using it yet, and so you're still going to get some really good content out of this. But if you'd like to learn even more about the whole value of equips, connect with us and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. And so presenting with me is Sam Anderson, and part of what Sam helps us do is at the heart of how we develop product is we talk to customers and understand what challenges they're facing. And so Sam leads that as our product leader and helps us really understand the challenges that they're having, and then we build software directly in response to that. So Sam is going to be the one that walks us through most of this. You are welcome to submit questions as we go, and you can put those in the chat, and we will get to those as we can. So Sam, welcome.
I'm excited. I've looked through the attendee list. A lot of you have had conversations with me over the last couple of weeks, which makes me excited that you're here. So yeah, let's jump into things and get started. The agenda, we're going to go over 4 main topics or tips to get a little bit more out of equips. So in general, I'll run through these. Number 1, we're going to talk about Equipsit, being at one place for everything. We'll talk about some nitty gritties here of users and permissions, and how that those two can combine for some, powerful routing for your organization. We'll talk about, some tips to improve uptime and empower your teams. And then we'll end with 3 possible applications for being ready for the unexpected. Yeah, so let's start with equipsing it. Equips really can be one place for everything. The lights, the toilet, the bushes outside, whatever you can come up with, you can equips it. And that's what makes something so powerful. This can become one place for anything. Your IT equipment could be in equips. Your security, retail, grounds facility, all of that can be in one place. So there's one source of truth to go to have a history of purchases or repair or replacements. You could have documents that are needed. You could have, maintenance contract information or actual copies of agreements there. You could have training manuals or materials, order forms, other key information for each of these assets. So you could have, key contact information for printers, scanners, or computers. You could have information for what to do when there's a security issue, or even with, information about different security assets. As well, many of you are coming from financial institutions with a heavy focus on retail equipment. There's so many different types, and it can be helpful. If you imagine that you're Jack at the Hilltop Credit Union, you have so many moving parts with these 5 categories here. And you're not an equipment expert. You're an expert on working with people, delivering an incredible experience for members and customers. You don't have time to deal in direct with the facilities issue that might be happening. Let's say that it's a light going out, but also the trees in the front yard. And then as well, you might have an ATM with an issue, or you might be struggling with some network connectivity. All of that, that's not your core competency, which is one of the powerful ways that Equips can step in and say, hey, we can take some of that off your back so you can get focused on what you're best at. And for Jack, the branch manager at Hilltop, that's delivering that incredible value to the people who walk in the door of the branch. Adam's going to take over and talk a little bit about some of the different ways that roles and locations can work in Equips.
I'm going to actually spend some time in our app so that you can get an idea of how this can actually work. So one of the things we know about a lot of the organizations that we partner with is that there are a lot of people involved in the process. And so that's why we know that roles are really, really important. So what I'm going to do is give you an example of, and so that means when there are a lot of people involved in the process, that means that there's information scattered across a lot of places. And so I'm going to show you how roles can really be impacted by the app by walking through an example where we have Greg. Greg is at actually at a different location. He's normally at Lakefront, but he's actually floated over to the Miller branch. And when he goes to place a service request, he notices that the printer that's in his office is not on the list. And so he goes through and very quickly through this process adds all the information that he needs to supply kind of all the detail behind what is needed to actually place a service request for this printer. And then he does that really simply. And this is maybe new. You may not have seen this, but users can do this. And tells us what's wrong. Is jamming and goes on with his day. And then actually he thinks to himself, well, you know what, as I just did that printer request, now that I think about it, I think I also need to schedule preventive maintenance for a telecache recycler. So he goes into the schedule preventive maintenance process, clicks, goes over to the Miller branch, clicks telecache recycler, realizes that one of the two telecache recyclers is in here, but not the other one. So he goes here and very quickly adds it. One of the things that we've realized is that the branch, people in the actual branch generally have a really good sense of what equipment actually exists because they're working with it all the time. And so they are a really good source of truth when it comes to what equipment actually exists inside the branch. Puts in the relevant information and then goes ahead and schedules preventive maintenance for a preferred day of sometime next Tuesday. And then is done with the preventive maintenance process. So that's one example of how roles work, and that Greg has the ability to put that information in here. However, what we also know is that Greg may not know the entire picture of what's going on. And what he didn't notice is that new printers were arriving on the 22nd, the next Monday, the 22nd. And the printer that he just placed a request on was actually going to be decommissioned. And so placing a service request on it probably is not the best idea. So meanwhile, Maggie gets notified that Greg had added some new equipment. And so she's able to log in as the admin and see, oh, Greg added a telecache recycler. Yep, this one makes sense. Let's go ahead and set this one to active. And now it's active. And then this printer, wait a second, this printer is going to be replaced. So actually, we're going to deactivate this and we're going to take that service request out of queue. And so this is just a good example of how one user knows something about the equipment that they're actually working with, and another user knows something else, which is the larger picture of what is going on with the equipment. Throughout the app, this concept of roles, that some people know part of the information and other people know another part of the information, works its way through in different roles and permissions.
All righty. So Adam just showed both how users can propose equipment as well as do preventive maintenance. And this is going to be powerful because users can be assigned to these different locations. So they have access only to what's pertinent to them, but also, and maybe more powerfully, they're going to be connected to the equipment that they are working with most closely on the day-to-day basis, which is really where some things can get exciting here. Moving on to talk a little bit more about workflows. There's a primary way that we see Equips can be helping you. That is, Equips can be a connection point between both your internal teams that work on things as well as external service providers. And this is the kind of, can be a bridge between the two of those. So, you know, as many of you who are current users of Equips, you know that the Smart Dispatch is a great way to instantly get help on a piece of equipment, to get something into the hands of a service provider. But as well, we have powerful, you know, internal work order routing. If you were on our last webinar, we talked about it then. We'll just talk about that briefly again. This routing is really how it all comes together. And there's so many ways to apply this. This is one of the real meat of the tip here. In each of your locations, you could set things up to have an approver at a specific location. So if I'm Jill and I, you know, own the Waterworks Bank and I have 50 branches across 4 states, I'm going to have a different service provider coverage based on those locations. Let's say it's a 5,000 square mile footprint. It might be difficult for me to get, you know, Burroughs or Diebold to go all the way across that radius there. So I'm going to need to make sure I have different locations, might have different processes. And if Jill is the manager of this Waterworks Bank, it's going to be powerful for her to make sure she's in control of knowing everyone's going to get the best service from the best people. And this can take a lot of strategizing and planning, which is one of the reasons we have an incredible team of account managers who are really strategic experts for not only ways to work with service providers and adopting practices there, but also they're some of the people who have the best tips on how to set up equips for success in your organization. A little zoom out of how this can all work. You have all these types of equipment here on the left, but that all through one simple process can be submitted into a service request. And that can be routed differently based on, you could have one routing for the entire fleet of all equipment goes one place, or you could have different categories respond differently. You could have different pieces of equipment at different locations do things. And then all the way down to, if you have some assets that are just so unique and so valuable, those could have their own process attached to this. Even now, we've released a feature where, depending on the time of day, this routing could be different. So during hours, you'd route to an internal team member, and then after hours, you'd be able to route to an external service provider who would be available 24-hour dispatch, for example. And in this routing, you have the opportunity for a review step, where if you wanted, let's take the burden off of the whole team, because we want to have everyone have access to see something and say something, but we don't want to be rolling trucks on every time the ATM screen is dim. We might want to have might want to do some review there just to have some oversight into what's going on. Or we could say, you know what, we just want to say everything's going to an external service provider or everything's going to our internal team. And this is adaptable. Every organization is going to have unique needs, and Equips is positioned to help each of them. All right. One of the ways that Equips can help that with each of these teams is by really empowering all the users of Equips, whether it be somebody who's working on the front lines, somebody who's working in accounting, or an executive who's looking to mitigate any possible reputation risk. Both Jack and Jill, by using Equips, can have an empowered team. They have people on the front lines who have this deep knowledge of how the equipment interfaces with a customer. But those people on the front line might not have all the context, understanding the bigger picture and how these things are at play together. And Equips can be the process to connect that, so that everyone is empowered to take action when they see it, but nothing is getting done out of the order or out of the ordinary. Equips can provide these service request histories. So every time that something is reviewed or wants to get done or is submitted for request, that's going to be tracked forever in Equips and can be looked at for the length of that asset and even beyond. And sometimes hunting for the right person can cause a headache. If you don't know who's in charge of the toilet and who's in charge of the fridge and who's supposed to be trimming the trees, it can be a hassle, and that can be a lot of strain on managers as well as other employees. And Equips can help remove some of that by having this one source of truth that everyone can communicate and collaborate through. And finally, we've seen that empowered teams using Equips can have improved service response times by removing unnecessary checks and balances and streamlining the process through Equips. We've seen that service providers can get on site and get equipment back up and running faster than by using traditional emails and phone calls and sending Excel spreadsheets back and forth. This really can empower the team to improve uptime. Finally, the last tip is really just 3 unique applications that I've talked about with users of Equips over the last couple of weeks here. The first is a branch had a power outage, and the person that I was speaking with wasn't a user of Equips, but as we discussed, it would have been so incredibly powerful if they could have had that someone could have gone to their phone, right, disconnected from the equipment that had lost power, and they could have said, all right, I need to contact this person immediately to get the power. And that could have been listed in Equips as well. And then they could say, I'm going to submit a ticket for this as well to follow up and be able to send this up the chain to notify everyone who needs to know that there is a problem here. This is a really powerful experience for both of us, seeing, wow, in this moment of crisis, Equips could have definitely helped bringing the power back online, as well as prepared everyone for when that unexpected thing happens. Another application of Equips is in the jamming TCR. For some of you that might have this problem, I apologize for bringing up bad memories, but TCRs, they can have problems. And sometimes those problems aren't so big that they bring the machine down. It just means that the branch staff will have to unjam that TCR. I spoke with a user of Equips who had a TCR that was jamming for 18 months, but the customers didn't have, or excuse me, her employees didn't have Equips at the branch location, so they didn't have the ease of just submitting an Equips ticket, of just knowing it only takes 4 taps to get help with something that they're struggling with. And so for 18 months, they manually unjammed the TCR, even while this was on a maintenance contract. I'm happy to say that that process is changed for this organization, and they're now having their users have Equips so that it's much easier to get tickets out, to get things fixed, even when they're not fully down. And finally, the final situation is drive-ups going down. Again, I apologize if this is a sore subject for some of you, but drive-ups go down, and that can cause a real stress when you have a line of cars possibly, or staff who aren't ready and prepared to have to be traffic controllers. That's not what they signed up to do. But when a drive-up goes down, Equips is a great location to say, here's the steps that should be taken. The cones are stored in this closet. You can direct traffic to lanes, to the red and blue lanes if the yellow were to go down. And here's the process. So that way that a branch manager doesn't have to get a phone call when they're traveling saying, hey, the drive-up's down, what should I be doing right now? Instead, the team can take instant action because they have that knowledge that's from Equips. So these 3 applications are great ways that Equips can be applied to unique situations to be helping organizations to respond to the unexpected in a more predictable, powerful way. And that's it for these 4 tips, really. Jack and Jill, both of them, through using Equips, can find that their team is going to be better able to respond to issues and deliver the best value they can for their members and customers. A couple of key notes here at the end. I think that Adam is going to take us through, and then Adam is going to respond to some of our questions as well.
Yeah, if you have questions, I would love to see those in the chat. You're welcome to submit those either directly to me or to everyone. That's great. And we're happy to go into any of those. And then just an announcement, our December webinar is going to be focused on how we communicate with service providers. There's an entire aspect of Equips that interfaces directly with those providers, allows them to put in things like estimated arrival times and add notes and see service histories. And that really helps give visibility to more people. So today we just focused on a couple of key areas, but there's a lot more to the app. So in December, we're going into what does it look like when communication with your webinar, with your service providers is really good. And then we would love it if you would give us a review on Capterra. I believe something like the first so many users that do that, we're sending a gift card to. So that would be outstanding. And then finally, we are looking for referrals. So we'd love to have you participate in that process. Talk to your account manager for details. We know that spreading the word about Equips is really powerful when it's person to person. So appreciate you all being here very, very much. So we are going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you for being here.